They didn't just mock her, they outright threw her out, as if her mere presence was a stain too shameful for their illustrious family name. Amidst the haute couture gowns, the dazzling jewels, and the smug, polished smiles, Eden Monroe, a black woman in a simple jacket, stood quietly. Ignoring the scornful glances, she knew one thing with certainty. The key to an explosive secret was already in her hands. The reading of Edward Lancaster's Will the Trillionaire Tycoon was about to commence. The prestigious family was poised to carve up a fortune beyond imagination. But what they didn't know was that at the very end of that will, the name that would be read aloud would change everything. And when the door to the secret swung open, those who had humiliated her would find themselves unable to stand tall against the truth, a truth that would force them to change forever. The story you're about to witness will remind you, honor and truth always come with a price. Stay tuned to see how Eden Monroe toppled an empire built on privilege. The noon sun slanted through towering glass windows, casting bright shafts of light across the gleaming oak-paneled conference room inside Preston and Hale law offices, where New York's old-world power displayed itself through oil paintings and heavy crystal chandeliers. The Montgomery family had gathered in full force. William Montgomery, the eldest son, in a hand-tailored Italian black suit. His wife, Clarissa, was dripping in pearls and wearing blazing red Louboutins. Marcus Montgomery, the younger brother, poised and polished, his eyes colder than steel, and a few extended relatives all radiating the air of people born to control wealth and dictate destinies. The atmosphere was heavy with a single expectation. Today, they would officially claim the massive fortune left behind by the late billionaire, Charles Montgomery. The sharp click of heels echoed across the marble lobby as Eden Monroe entered. A black woman with warm caramel skin, wearing a simple gray cotton dress, her curly hair pulled back in a neat tie, her battered flats barely making a sound. The contrast between her and the extravagant surroundings was as jarring as a rip across fine silk. Every Montgomery head turned in unison, cold, appraising, and unhidden disdain in their eyes. "Excuse me," Clarissa said in a shrill voice. "Housekeeping staff should use the back entrance." Marcus chuckled under his breath. William frowned at the head attorney. "Mr. Preston," silently demanding an explanation. "Mr. Preston," a silver-haired man with a weathered face, merely gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "This is Miss Eden Monroe," he said firmly. "She was invited here per the final wishes of Mr. Charles Montgomery." A ripple of murmured irritation spread around the table. William sat up straighter, his voice sharp. Charles must have been joking. Who is she, a babysitter, a gardener, or some cruel final prank? Eden remained standing, her deep brown eyes calm as they met each sneering glare thrown her way. She offered no defense, no explanations, only a steady reply. "I was invited, and I trust Mr. Charles Montgomery had his reasons." Her composure left Clarissa momentarily speechless. In their world, people like Eden weren't supposed to hold their heads high, and that serene dignity hit harder than any slap. "Mr. Preston motioned for Eden to take a seat, though the Montgomery family conspicuously left 2 empty chairs between her and the others, isolating her like an unwanted blemish amid their solemn ceremony. No one bothered to mask their contempt. No one offered even a perfunctory greeting. "Mr. Preston opened his brown leather case and withdrew a thick envelope sealed with red wax, the emblem of the Montgomery estate. "We shall begin," he announced. Every crack of the wax breaking sounded like a hammer pounding down on their boiling greed. William leaned back, smirking confidently. Clarissa fondled her pearl necklace as if already counting her future millions. Marcus closed his eyes halfway, ready for what he assumed would be a straightforward reading. Only Eden sat motionless, her hands clasped lightly on her lap, as if gripping a secret far more valuable than any fortune. The thick will was unfolded. The room seemed to freeze. Mr. Preston's voice, solemn and clear, filled the air. "I call Charles Montgomery, Hereby bequeath all real estate holdings, company shares, bank accounts, and valuable assets to... William held his breath. Clarissa nearly lunged forward in her seat. To Ferdinand, to Eden Monroe. A silent explosion rocked the room. There was no immediate reaction, just the soft clinking of crystal glasses bumping into each other. Clarissa shrieked. Impossible. Marcus snapped his head up, his gray eyes wide, and beneath the shock, there was something else. Fear. Eden did not flinch. Only a faint, razor-sharp smile, thin as mist, deadly as a blade, flickered across her lips. The real battlefield had only just begun. Impossible, Clarissa screamed, jumping to her feet so violently that her chair clattered loudly onto the polished floor, the crash slicing through the stunned silence. William yanked at his tie, his face pale with fury, while Marcus remained seated, his eyes sharp as blades, fixed on Eden with a gaze that seemed intent on burning her to ashes. But Eden remained seated, her back straight, chin held high, her deep brown eyes quietly observing as the aristocratic mass before her began to crack and crumble. Attorney Preston continued calmly, unfazed. Mr. Charles Montgomery validated this decision through a notarized video recording made 3 months prior to his passing. He pressed a button, and a large screen descended silently from the ceiling. Charles Montgomery's face appeared aged, frail, but with eyes as clear and piercing as ever. If you're watching this, he said, his voice hoarse but unwavering, then I am no longer among you. And I need you to understand one thing very clearly. Eden Monroe is not just an honored guest of mine. She is the only person in my long life who ever saw me as a human being, not just a money printing machine. William slammed his palm down on the table. Enough! This is an outrage! Clarissa jumped in, her voice choked with rage. What did she do? Seduce him, manipulate a lonely old man to steal his fortune? Eden tilted her head slightly, her gaze unflinching. No protest, no self-defense. Only a calm, cold pride, a mirror reflecting all the smallness and cruelty in the room. Marcus finally spoke, his voice dry. We'll contest it. No outsider, no bloodline, no title can just walk away with the entire Montgomery estate. Attorney Preston simply shrugged. Of course, you're within your rights to challenge, but please note, every procedure has been triple validated by both state and federal courts. And if you wish, we also have recorded conversations between Mr. Montgomery and Miss Monroe, confirming repeatedly his full mental clarity and voluntary intent. Clarissa's face turned scarlet, her hand trembling in fury. This is unacceptable. A no-name black girl taking the Montgomery legacy. This is a disgrace. William shot her a warning glance, fighting to contain his anger. Deep down, he understood. The louder they screamed, the worse it would look once the news inevitably leaked. The Montgomerys had always lived by image, and now that image was fracturing. Attorney Preston, cold and clinical as a judge, continued. Mr. Charles left behind a personal letter to be read immediately following the will. He drew a thin yellow envelope from his case, slid it open with a silver letter opener, and read aloud. To the Radamer and to the Montgomery family. I leave none of my fortune to you because I have witnessed the rot of ambition, the cruelty of pride, and the coldness of hearts that value only wealth. I leave everything to Eden because she reminded me that human decency exists without price tags. She didn't need me, and that is precisely why she deserves it. The final hammer blow fell. Clarissa collapsed into her chair, ghost pale. Marcus clenched his fists under the table. William leaned back, his gaze hollow. And Eden, she sat unmoving, like a pillar of stone amid a tempest of rage, her deep eyes reflecting not triumph, but a sorrowful inevitability. As if this moment, long prepared for, brought her no joy, only necessity. A storm was about to tear through the Montgomery dynasty, and Eden Monroe, the girl they had scorned, belittled, and dismissed, stood now at the very center of the hurricane. The moment the will reading ended, The room immediately transformed into a silent battlefield. Cold, blade-like glares were hurled at Eden Monroe, the lone figure who had just claimed the once untouchable fortune of the Montgomery dynasty. Clarissa was the first to shatter the silence. She stormed toward Attorney Preston, jabbing a manicured finger at him, her shrill voice slicing through the tense air. "We demand an immediate suspension of the will's execution. This is a conspiracy. We'll sue all the way to the Supreme Court if we must." William could no longer maintain his polished facade either. He strode up to Eden, leaning in close, flashing a chilling smile. "Don't think you've won. No one of us, dear Anthony. You have no idea what you've just started." "Monroe!" Eden merely looked up at him, her gaze cool and unflinching, as if his threats were nothing but a passing breeze. Marcus, who had remained silent until now, finally rose to his feet. He calmly adjusted his cufflinks and walked toward the door. But before leaving, he turned back, his eyes dark and ominous. "You may think you've won today, Eden Monroe, but the war is just beginning." The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like the first gunshot of an impending war. The counterattack began the very next day. First came the media blitz. Tabloids exploded with suggestive headlines about Eden Monroe, the mystery woman who inherited the Montgomery estate, lover or con artist. Who is Eden Monroe, the unknown face who snatched billions? Each article strategically used unflattering photos. Eden in a plain cotton dress, worn-out shoes, her modest smile twisted into something deceptive under vicious captions. Clarissa even appeared on a morning talk show, sobbing dramatically. "My father was too trusting. Who knows what kind of manipulation he suffered in his final days?" Suchrik. William, meanwhile, issued veiled statements implying Eden's shadowy past, hinting at supposed dubious connections, though, of course, offering no actual evidence. Across social media, hashtags like Gold Digger and Fraud Queen spread like wildfire. Eden read every word, not with anger, not with panic, but with a quiet, heavy sadness, the sadness of someone condemned by a world eager to judge her for the color of her skin, her humble appearance, and her silent dignity in the face of a billion-dollar fortune. But Eden did not back down. The second strike from the Montgomerys came through legal action. A week after the will reading, Eden received a court notice. Richard Montgomery, a distant cousin, propped up by Clarissa and William, had filed a lawsuit to contest the will, claiming coercion and manipulation. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Clarissa threw a lavish tea party to rally public support, inviting socialites and discreetly spreading more malicious rumors that Eden had bewitched Charles Montgomery, that she couldn't possibly have earned his trust naturally. The smear campaign grew so public that even some mainstream outlets started publishing veiled, condescending analyses. In the eye of the storm, Eden had exactly 3 allies. Attorney Preston, patient and steadfast, like a steel fortress. Her best friend, Amara, constantly encourages her to stay strong. And, surprisingly, an unexpected new ally, Jackson Montgomery, Marcus's grandson and a backup heir, who quietly reached out, requesting a private meeting. Amid the overwhelming darkness of hatred, these tiny flames became Eden's only source of strength. She knew they would do everything in their power to drag her into the mud. But she also knew something far more important. Truth, no matter how long it's buried, always rises. And Eden Monroe, the girl they once despised, would be the flame that burned down the grand illusion the Montgomery family had built over generations. The afternoon before the hearing, Eden Monroe stood alone on the balcony of her modest apartment. The sunset bathed the worn neighborhood in gold, and the October breeze played gently with her loose hair. At her feet, the newspapers filled with slanderous headlines lay scattered, stark evidence of a world eager to judge her by appearance alone. The doorbell rang. Eden opened the door. Standing before her was a young man's sun-kissed skin, a simple denim jacket. His eyes gleamed with a rare seriousness. "Jackson Montgomery," he introduced himself, extending his hand. Eden took it, feeling the firmness and sincerity in his grip. "I know they're not going to play fair," Jackson said bluntly, his voice low and resolute. "And I know the reason my grandfather chose you wasn't some passing whim." Eden frowned slightly. "You came here because she does to wanted." Jackson met her gaze head-on, his eyes sharp as a blade. "I have evidence. Proof that Richard, Clarissa, and William conspired to seize the estate long before Charles ever passed away." They sat down as Jackson spread out a folder. Inside were internal documents, emails, and recordings, clear evidence that Richard and William had secretly set up illicit investment funds under the Montgomery Foundation's name, embezzling millions of dollars without Charles's knowledge. One audio clip made Eden clench her fists. "Don't worry, the old man's mind is slipping. Give it a few more months, and it'll all be ours." That voice, Eden recognized it immediately. It was William, the very man who had mocked her during the will reading. Jackson looked up, his tone somber. They thought Charles didn't know, but he did. And instead of dragging them through the mud, he chose a different kind of justice. By giving everything to someone truly worthy. Eden felt her throat tighten. It wasn't just the injustice they had hurled at her, it was the cold betrayal they had inflicted on their own blood. "But why are you helping me?" Eden asked, locking eyes with Jackson. He smiled faintly, a sadness clouding his features. "Because I grew up watching that rotten system rot everything it touched. Because I know if it's not stopped, the Montgomery estate will become a walking corpse, a hollow empire rotting beneath a shine." He paused, then added in a quieter voice, "And because I owe Charles, a debt I can only repay by standing on the side of what's right." Eden gripped the folder tightly, feeling as if she now held her first real weapon in this battle. That night, in her small apartment, Eden, Attorney Preston, and Jackson meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence. Each email, each recording, and each illicit transaction document was categorized and prepared. By the time the clock struck midnight, Preston closed the file with a gleam in his eye. "We're not just defending anymore. We're counterattacking." He looked at Eden, admiration and steely determination lighting up his gaze. "Tomorrow, we won't just defend your inheritance. We're going to expose the rot inside Montgomery to the whole world." Eden nodded. For the first time, she wasn't facing the storm alone. She had allies. She had the truth. She had justice on her side. And she knew when the sun rose, the real battle would begin. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed, trampled, or sidelined simply for not fitting the world's shallow, polished ideals. That morning, the Central District Courthouse was packed. Outside, reporters jostled for position, all lenses trained on one story: the Montgomery inheritance dispute, where an outsider was accused of defrauding one of the city's most prestigious families. Eden Monroe stepped out of an old SUV, her head held high. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, her gaze calm, as if the noisy crowd didn't exist. Walking beside her was Attorney Preston, sharply dressed in a gray suit, his face honed like a blade after a sleepless night. Across the street, Richard, Clarissa, and William Montgomery stepped out of a sleek black limousine. Clad in expensive suits and designer dresses, they carried themselves with a haughty arrogance laced with contempt. William threw Eden a sneering look. "Get ready for the lesson of your life, little girl." Eden simply smiled, her eyes glinting with something William would never understand: unshakable faith in the truth. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick and heavy. Judge Eleanor Wright, a middle-aged white woman known for her icy impartiality, sat ramrod straight, her gaze piercing every movement. "The case of the Montgomery will dispute is now in session," she declared, her gavel striking like a war drum. The Montgomery family's attorney, a gray-haired man, was quick to rise. "Your Honor, my clients, the rightful heirs of Charles Montgomery, contend that Miss Eden Monroe exploited Mr. Montgomery's declining health to illegitimately seize his assets." He glanced at Eden, as if she were filth. An outsider, no family, no name suddenly appearing to take everything. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Preston rose to respond. Your Honor, these baseless accusations not only insult my client, but desecrate the solemn wishes of Mr. Charles Montgomery himself. He paused, locking eyes with each juror. And today, we will prove that it's not my client who betrayed Mr. Montgomery's trust. It's the very people sitting across this courtroom, cloaked in their false morality. The tension tightened. In a steady, commanding voice, Preston began presenting. Financial records in New Jersey and Warrington. Irregular withdrawals from the Montgomery Foundation. Internal recordings. Conversations between William and Richard plotting to steal the estate. Forged signatures on shareholder documents. Eden sat silently, each piece of evidence cutting through the Montgomery family's decades-long facade. When the recording echoed through the courtroom, William's mocking laughter said, "Once the old man croaks, the whole pile's ours." The entire room froze. Richard turned ghostly pale. Clarissa gripped the chair so tightly her nails tore into the leather. William sat in stunned silence, his hands trembling. Judge Wright lifted her gaze, sharp as steel. "Mr. Montgomery, do you wish to contest this evidence?" Silence. A silence louder than any confession. Eden rose. For the first time, she spoke directly to the very people who once looked down on her. "I don't need titles. I don't need money. I only need the truth to be heard." Her voice was low and steady, but it rang out like a bell. "You mocked me because I didn't look like you. You scorned me because my dress wasn't designer, because I don't carry a distinguished last name." She paused, her gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. "But it was me, someone like me, that Charles Montgomery chose. Not because I was cunning, not because I was rich, but because my heart remained whole, while yours were long sold to greed." Whispers swirled through the courtroom. In the back, reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they were witnessing history. Finally, Eden turned to Judge Wright and bowed slightly. "I leave it to the truth to speak for itself." As she sat back down, the entire room felt as if it were caught in a silent, seismic wave of emotion. Judge Wright adjusted her glasses, her voice ringing out through the tense courtroom. "Before the court issues a preliminary ruling, I've been informed that an important supplemental piece of evidence has just been submitted." Preston calmly rose, holding a thick, carefully sealed envelope. "Your Honor," he said, his gaze briefly meeting Eden's calm, unwavering eyes. "We would like to submit a handwritten will by Mr. Charles Montgomery, written and signed personally by him, stored securely at Westboro Trust Bank." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Richard leaned forward, his face draining of color. "Impossible, the will was notarized 2 years ago." Preston looked him dead in the eye, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Correct, Sue or Nuranino. But this will was drafted only 3 months before Mr. Charles passed away, following a private meeting, mind you, to which none of the so-called lawful heirs were invited." Judge Wright's gavel slammed down, restoring order. The court clerk opened the envelope and carefully pulled out thin sheets of paper, each bearing steady, clear handwriting. Every page bore Charles Montgomery's signature, verified by recorded video at the bank, a safeguard against future disputes. The clerk began to read aloud. "I, Charles Montgomery, in full possession of my faculties, hereby transfer all my assets, businesses, real estate, and investments, not to any blood relative." The room held its breath, every eye riveted on the trembling sheets. "I bequeath everything to Eden Monroe, the only person who showed me unconditional kindness, when all others saw me as nothing more than a printing press for their wealth." It hit the room like a thunderclap. Clarissa shrieked. "No, impossible, it's forged." William stammered, his face ghostly pale. "She must have seduced him, poisoned his mind." Judge Wright raised a hand sharply, her voice slicing through the chaos. "This will is accompanied by video evidence of the signing, and under the law, it holds supreme authority. Eden remained seated. No smile, no gloating glance. Wish him on a one chim. Only the calm of someone who had long understood that justice requires patience, but it always arrives. Preston continued. We also submit medical records confirming Mr. Charles Montgomery's full mental competency at the time of signing. The clerk read further. As 4101. I leave nothing to those who share my blood but not my spirit. Eden Monroe alone understood this. A heavy silence fell, as if the whole world outside the courtroom was holding its breath. Beyond the windows, birds flew across the wide blue sky, free and proud, just like Eden at that moment. Richard sprang to his feet, gripping the back of his chair. I'll sue. I'll take this to the Supreme Court. Judge Wright fixed him with an icy stare. Mr. Richard Montgomery, you are within your rights to appeal. However, be warned, knowingly submitting fabricated evidence or baseless claims will result in criminal charges. It was a nail hammered into the coffin of Montgomery's last hopes. Eden rose. She turned to face Richard, Clarissa, and William, those who had mocked, sneered, and scorned her without mercy. In a steady voice, Eden said, I don't need your acceptance. I only need the truth. Then she turned and walked out of the courtroom, each step firm and deliberate, leaving behind the shattered remains of a once untouchable dynasty. Outside, reporters swarmed her. Flashbulbs popped wildly. A microphone was thrust toward her. Monroe, how do you feel at this moment? Eden paused, her eyes resolute. I didn't win for myself. I won for everyone who was ever overlooked, ever made to feel invisible. And today, the world has no choice but to see them. And she walked on, leaving behind a story that would be told and retold across the city, the story of a Black woman, scorned and underestimated, who reclaimed justice through her unshakable dignity and will. Within less than 24 hours after the trial, Eden Monroe's name dominated every headline. From dry financial news reports to primetime news features, she was hailed as the unexpected heiress, the new symbol of American justice, and the woman who challenged the system and won. On social media, the hashtag Eden Monroe flooded the platforms, amassing millions of shares, comments, and messages of admiration. Meanwhile, at the Montgomery estate, a very different scene unfolded. Richard, Clarissa, and William sat in stunned silence in the grand but now cold sitting room, surrounded by ancestral paintings and priceless antiques, all of which no longer belonged to them. The family's legal advisor, Mr. Goodman, placed a thick folder in front of them. I regret to inform you, he said, voice clipped and formal, that per the court ruling and the newly recognized will, all assets, shares, and properties will be transferred to Missouri. Monroe within 60 days, Clarissa hissed. We have to sue. We have to do something. We can't let some ordinary Black girl steal everything. Goodman shook his head, blunt and unyielding. Any legal action now would only cost you more money and further destroy your reputation. Especially after the video of Mr. Charles signing the will went viral. William buried his face in his hands, letting out a guttural scream. We've lost everything. Richard sat motionless, hands clenching the arms of his chair, eyes hollow. Deep down, he knew it wasn't Eden who had destroyed the Montgomery Empire. They had destroyed themselves with their arrogance and contempt. Elsewhere, Eden Monroe sat at the rickety desk in her modest apartment. In front of her were 2 stacks of papers, one listing all the assets, bank accounts, and shares, soon to be transferred. The other, a list of charitable organizations, scholarship funds, and community projects she planned to support. Eden picked up a pen and circled one line. Monroe Scholarship Fund to give opportunities to children who had been forgotten by the world, just as she once had been. Beside her, the phone rang. It was Preston. Mr. Monroe. His warm voice came through. Did you know the Montgomery estate alone has been valued at over $25 million? Eden smiled softly. Then let's turn it into a youth skills and arts center for underprivileged teens. Preston was silent for a moment, stunned. It was a bold idea, a stunning reversal to the very class that once scorned her. On the official day of the asset transfer, the media packed the lobby of Westboro Trust. Clarissa, draped in a gloomy black Chanel dress, couldn't mask the bitterness on her face as she signed the final document, certifying the relinquishment of her inheritance. Richard kept his face cold, though his eyes betrayed defeat. William kept his head down, avoiding every camera flash. Meanwhile, Eden entered the room, standing tall, her head held high, her face free of any smugness, marked only by calm dignity and silent pride. She signed the documents, each stroke of her pen carving a new chapter in history. A girl once mocked, now rewriting the fate of an entire dynasty. That evening, Eden stood alone in the grand hall of the Montgomery Mansion, a place whose doors had once been firmly closed to people like her. She slipped off her high heels and walked barefoot across the cold wooden floor. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting the reflection of a lone black woman, no longer small, no longer invisible. Now, Eden Monroe was the rightful owner not just of property, but of a symbol of justice, self-respect, and the overturning of prejudice. In the distance, the deep chime of midnight echoed. But for Eden, this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of a world where true values, kindness, perseverance, and justice could finally shine with rightful power. Here's the translation you requested. Just a few months after Eden Monroe officially took over the Montgomery family's entire fortune, a special ceremony was held right at the former mansion, now no longer a hollow symbol of luxury, but reborn as the Monroe Center for Opportunity and Justice. Hundreds gathered under the warm golden sunlight, former workers who had been fired, orphans, underprivileged teens. They didn't come to admire wealth. They came to welcome a new beacon of hope. Eden stepped onto the stage in a simple yet powerful suit. No gold jewelry, no glittering diamonds, only a serene smile and eyes filled with a silent promise. The world would no longer be the same. Welcome to a place where dreams are no longer decided by your bloodline or your bank account. Eden's voice rang out strong through the loudspeakers. But what truly silenced the crowd was the sincerity behind every word she spoke. Today, the Montgomery estate is no longer a symbol of privilege. It is a lighthouse for all the forgotten souls. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the front rows, where children of color, immigrants, and struggling veterans sat, their eyes locked onto her. We will raise future leaders, scientists, teachers, artists, entrepreneurs. No one will be judged by the color of their skin, their origins, or the clothes they wear. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Some even wept because for the first time, they truly felt seen. Off to the side, the media swarmed, desperate for a statement from Eden. Mara Winch, Monroe, one reporter asked, "Would you say this victory is a sweet revenge against the Montgomery family?" Eden simply smiled, her demeanor calm. "Nay, this is not revenge. This is overdue justice, and my real work is only just beginning." That answer quickly became the headline across dozens of major outlets. Eden Monroe, the woman who turned contempt into opportunity and pain into power. That night, after the ceremony, Eden quietly returned to her old apartment, the place she had lived in back when she was just an unknown teacher. At her door stood an elderly man, dressed in a faded work jacket, hair streaked with gray. It was Mr. Green, the old security guard who once let a young Eden take shelter from a cold rainstorm after she had been expelled from her high school for inappropriate attire. Eden said nothing. She simply stepped forward and embraced him tightly. "I made it, Mr. Green," she whispered, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. He gently patted her back, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just make it, child. You changed the whole damn world." Days later, Eden launched the Green Monroe Scholarship Fund for the Children's Society had once written off, just as they once did to her. Each scholarship was more than money. It carried a message. You don't have to be born into glory to reach for the stars. A year later, at a major fundraising gala in New York, Eden Monroe stood on stage. The audience was filled with heavyweights from finance, arts, and education. But no one leaned back in boredom. They leaned forward, eager to hear something greater than money. Eden took a deep breath and smiled. Once, I was mocked for wearing a simple dress. I was cast out for the color of my skin and the emptiness of my wallet. But those moments taught me the greatest lesson of all. Your true worth is never what you wear. It's how you rise after you've been pushed down. The hall erupted in applause, eyes glistening with hope. And Eden Monroe, once scorned, had become the living embodiment of an eternal truth. You may be judged for your background. You may be rejected because of your skin. But if your heart stays strong, no one can deny your light. That is the greatest victory. They once mocked Eden Monroe. They once slammed every door in her face. But today, the girl they scorned rewrote the destiny of an entire generation. Sometimes, those born in dazzling spotlights think they own the world. They don't realize the fiercest flames often rise from the quietest corners. Who you are, where you come from, none of it matters. What matters is, will you rise like Eden or surrender to prejudice? If you believe the greatest power lies within your own heart, leave a comment. I will light up the world with my own light. If you believe true worth doesn't need permission to shine, hit like, comment I will never give up, and share Eden Monroe's story so more hearts can be inspired. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel, because there are many more stories of hope and courage waiting for you.